Welcome back to the Adam Schefter podcast as we head out of week 5 into week 6, and we are taping this right before Monday night countdown because I have a travel activity on Tuesday this week where I have to fly out on special assignment to the state of Michigan to visit Ann Arbor for a little interview that will be airing on ESPN in November that should be very, very interesting, which we will share more about and which will actually run in this podcast space in its entirety the week after Thanksgiving. Little teaser for everybody. And we will also be joined today by Boston Connor of the Pat McAfee Show, who will step in to lead this week's six pack. And after we get to Boston Connor, we'll be joined by the Pittsburgh Steelers standout wide receiver George Pickens, who's had over 1,000 yards last season, and is now in his third season with the organization as the Steelers look to get back on track in the win column Sunday against the Las Vegas Raiders. But let's go back to Boston Connor for this week's six-pack.
Shefty, it is an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. Let's get right into it. I know you're busy tonight. Topic number 1, big matchup of week 6 here. We got Lamar Jackson versus Jayden Daniels. You coined it last week, Lamar versus Lamar 2.0. What stands out to you in this matchup?
And that's the whole thing. That's what I remember. Every year before the draft, I take all these notes from all these scouts, personnel executives, coaches, and there were two individuals with great football knowledge I respect who individually, separately said to me before the draft last year that Jayden Daniels is Lamar Jackson 2.0. Now we get Lamar Jackson 2.0 traveling to Baltimore, to the home of the original Lamar Jackson for really the matchup of this upcoming week. Now I know there are some other great games, but what is more exciting right now than Jayden Daniels versus Lamar Jackson? Jayden Daniels has captured the imagination of Washington. He looks like he's going to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year. I know we're only 5 games into the season, but the guy's made his mark on and off the field. Here's a great story about Jayden Daniels from last week. They win the game in Arizona. His offensive line doesn't give up a single sack. The team shows up, and one day, some of the people in the front office noticed that Jayden Daniels is in the building one day last week just after 5 a.m. with all these donuts. They're like, Jayden, what are you doing in the building this early with all these donuts? And he's like, I want to make sure my guys are taken care of. Got all these donuts for the offensive line who didn't allow me to be sacked once in Arizona, and I want to show them the love for the way that they protected me. That story is a simple story, Boston Connor, but that tells me an awful lot.
The vibes for them just have seemed high the whole entire season. Like you even mentioned just the post games with Cliff after they beat the Cardinals. I mean, everyone seems to have each other's back in that locker room, and that shows that.
And here's the thing. They're winning now. It's exciting to be a Commanders fan, which, first of all, that sentence has never been uttered ever before. It's exciting to be a Commanders fan because they changed the name of the franchise recently. So we are the first person ever to say it's exciting to be a Commanders fan, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
Beyond that, beyond being excited to be a Commanders fan this year, you have the hopes of this guy leading your franchise for the next 12, 15 years. It's exciting to be a Commanders fan for the next decade plus. And the guy is out there making plays. He's out there buying donuts. Guy feels like he totally gets it. And now we get to see him travel up the road to Baltimore for the matchup of week 6.
And you mentioned Baltimore. I mean, they look pretty damn impressive too. I mean, the vibes are high as hell for them. Coming off an 0-2 start, they win 3 straight. You know, Lamar has kind of figured it out. That leads right into topic number 2. Why do you think this Ravens team has been so impressive? Because they really have figured it out, seemingly so, coming off this thriller in OT at Cincinnati.
What's really interesting is that they are on a record pace for rushing yards. They are on pace right now. I know it's only 5 games to rush for more yards than any team in the league. And our ace researcher on Sunday Countdown, Evan Kaplan, put up a stat on Sunday that Derrick Henry himself had rushed for more yards than a handful of teams by himself. By himself, Derrick Henry, a man that the Dallas Cowboys couldn't afford, a man that some people thought had lost a step. Derrick Henry has come in and with Lamar Jackson has formed the single most dominant 1-2 rushing combination. And it's going to be no secret what the Ravens try to do on Sunday against the Commanders. They're going to try to run the ball with Derrick Henry and the original Lamar Jackson as Jayden Daniels is trying to run the ball against them with Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler. And again, if we combine topics 1 and topics 2 from this week's six-pack, we get a winning combination and an awesome matchup that features Lamar 2.0, an all-time rushing attack, all in one stadium in the Beltway area on Sunday.
I mean, it's exactly what you're looking for before the season. You don't know which games are going to be massive. Before the season started, would you think that the Commanders versus the Ravens week 6 would be the game that everyone's looking to?
Well, what's funny is ESPN and every network has meetings with the NFL to lobby for matchups they want and teams they want to feature. There was not a network out there last year that would have been lobbying for the Washington Commanders.
No way.
A Commanders-Ravens game would have been an afterthought. And now that is so much more appealing than a lot of the matchups that are out there, but that's just the way it is.
I mean, a flex there would be awesome. But let's move to topic number 3, Shefty. Where are we with the potential Tua update? Obviously, the Dolphins get a win over New England, but still offense is not the same as what it was when Tua's at the helm.
So Boston, the schedule sets up like this, basically. The Dolphins are in a bye this week, which gives Tua another week to rest up. Then they play at Indianapolis next week, and then he is eligible to come off injured reserve against the Arizona Cardinals. So that game would be October 27th. And nobody's saying it right now, but I believe that Tua has in his mind that that's the game that he would like to come back for, which means he would be sidelined for 4 games, the minimum for being placed on IR. And the Dolphins were able to find a way to steal a victory on Sunday against the Patriots. And if they could find a way to steal one more win against the Colts here, then I think that the Dolphins might feel like in that division, in that conference, that they might be positioned to make a playoff push. But everybody's being very careful, as they should be. Everybody's being very thoughtful, as they should be. But I don't think it changes Tua Tagovailoa's desire to get back to the football field as soon as possible. And I think we could be seeing him at the end of this month, if and when he is brought off injured reserve.
Massive for them, too, with the Bills losing and the Jets losing, kind of gain a little ground. I believe they move right into second place there in the AFC East. So for that to happen during this whole stint with Tua being out, and, I'm glad that he's coming back to play because it is a true treat with him in that offense, especially what you see without him being in there, Shefty. Moving to topic number 4, the Raiders. I don't know, if you saw who Mark Davis was talking to this weekend. Obviously, Gardner Minshew gets benched for Aiden O'Connell. Then we look at the sideline and, there's Mark Davis talking with Shedeur Sanders. That's kind of a nice little tidbit. Is this something we should start looking at now with Vegas and Shedeur?
Well, here's the interesting thing. The Raiders tried to and couldn't trade up to get Jayden Daniels. There was no way that Washington was going to trade him. And I don't think it's any secret right now that the Raiders are going to be in the quarterback market in the 2025 draft. And if we were to look at that draft today, which I do think is really interesting, the top 5 picks today would be the Patriots at 1, the Bengals at 2, the Jaguars at 3, the Rams at 4, and the Browns at 5. Already, that in and of itself would create a lot of storylines, but the Raiders might not be that far behind. And the Raiders, if and when they trade Davante Adams, and we are taping this Monday evening, there has not been any movement yet. We'll see if and when there is some, but they're going to be looking for draft capital to move up to get a quarterback in the 2025 draft. Ooh. And Shedeur Sanders is going to be somebody that I think would sell in Las Vegas. I think Deion Sanders knows the history and tradition of the Raiders franchise. Everybody would understand how popular he would be. Deion is a very savvy businessman. He would know the meaning of his son playing in Las Vegas and saving state tax. So there would be an extra 8 to 10% of his money by playing for the Raiders. There are so many things about this that would make sense. The only thing that has to happen is the Raiders have to be in reach of Shedeur Sanders, who's going to be a first-round draft pick, I believe, and they have to be picking high enough in the draft to be able to get him. But yes, Mark Davis was spotted with Shedeur Sanders this weekend at a WNBA game, a Las Vegas Aces game. The two were talking it up, and I'm sure that Mark Davis would relish the opportunity to go take somebody like Shedeur Sanders, considering right now the Raiders are struggling at the quarterback position. Couldn't get up last year to get the quarterback they wanted, will want more ammunition to move up in the draft this year. So let the speculation about Shedeur Sanders and the Las Vegas Raiders begin, being that Mark Davis already has fueled it by being spotted with him in Las Vegas.
Deion has mentioned too that he's going to be pretty specific on where his kid goes.
Yep.
Are those some of the things that he's looking at when it comes to tradition? The of the franchise, the ownership, and the head coach, or do you know what he's looking for specifically per se?
Deion would be a modern day version of what Archie Manning was doing for Eli Manning, and Archie did not trust Eli to go to an organization like the Chargers at that time. And I don't know that Deion would trust his son Shedeur going to certain franchises. Deion knows which ones he'd like his son to play for and which ones he wouldn't. And I would say that he would give the Raiders, off the top of my head, he would give the Raiders his blessing and he would sign off on Shedeur going to Las Vegas. But let's see if the Raiders could be drafting high enough or moving up high enough in the draft to go take a player as talented as Shedeur Sanders.
Interesting. Well, we'll see. You got to love the draft talk. But speaking of the Raiders, topic number 5, where are we with the Davante Adams trade? Do you know anything? Has anything changed? I know you just mentioned it here, but what's the status in the Davante Adams saga?
Well, I want to say this again, Boston. We're taping this. Can I call you Boston, by the way?
I said that Schefter, you can call me whatever you want. Okay.
I keep going Connor, Boston. Like I inevitably call people their first names. So sometimes I drift back to that. So I go back to Boston, even though people call you Connor. So I apologize about that. So let me say Connor, because that's how people call you. Connor. But my mind drifts to the first name. Connor. As we tape this on Monday night, there hasn't been, to my knowledge, a lot of movement yet today. The Jets were getting back from London. The Saints are playing on Monday Night Football. And I still believe that those are the two teams that Davante Adams most wants to play for. Now, it's not like he's got a no-trade clause in his contract, but any team that's going to trade valuable draft pick compensation is going to want him to restructure his contract, and he's not going to have to restructure his contract in a place that he wouldn't want to go. So if he wants to restructure, he'll bend over backwards to make it work for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets or Derek Carr and the Saints. As we tape this on Monday night, 5:30, I thought today was a day we could potentially get movement, and maybe we still will as we record this, but I would think that this is going to wait till Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whenever. Undoubtedly, this is going to heat up. Undoubtedly, he's going to get dealt. We just don't know where and when. I still think the Jets and the Saints, as we said last week, are the two most logical places, but the Raiders have been telling teams they're not taking less than the 2. And they've told teams that we're not paying any of Davante's money due this year, even though they're getting hit with a bill of $970,000 for each game he doesn't play right now with that hamstring injury, because that's a big, hefty bill. So they're saying a lot of things. We got to get a 2. We're not paying his money. But in the end, if nobody's offering a 2 and somebody is saying you got to pay the money, something's got to give somewhere. So it's up to everybody in this spot, Davante Adams, the Raiders, the Jets, the Saints, everybody to give a little bit to make something happen, because we may get a bigger name at the trade deadline, but certainly this is a name that's going to get a lot of attention until the time he's dealt. That time could come at any time. Don't know that it's going to happen Monday as we record this at 5:32 Eastern, Connor, but we will see if and when this deal does come down.
Fair play. Sounds like something might happen tonight. You do know for a fact.
No. I don't think it's going to happen tonight.
Okay.
But I reserve the right to change my mind, and I don't want to look stupid on this podcast. So that's why I know I've covered this league long enough to know that things change just like that. And just when you think something's not going to happen, it does an hour later. So that's why I'm careful about everything. It's kind of like in fantasy football. Like I was playing Field Yates this weekend, and he's saying, "Aren't you going to talk any smack to me?" I'm like, "No, I'm not poking the bear because I know that as soon as you poke the bear, that's when you get poked back." Just
Karma.
like I say in football, nothing's ever absolute, nothing's ever certain. Things change, and anything could happen at any moment. I'm not expecting right now that anything is going to happen tonight with Davante Adams, but I could get a call as soon as we hang up from this podcast and say, "Get ready, this trade's coming."
Fair, very smart of you. Did you beat Fields? Is it over or no?
No, Fields going to beat me. Going into tonight, I'm down to Rashid Shaheed. I need like 23 points. And let the record show before that game begins, Rashid Shaheed may break one long play, but I'm not even looking down at that score until and if and when Rashid Shaheed breaks one monster play. If that happens, I'll look down to see if I have a chance. Right now, in my mind, I got no chance.
Fair play. Still smart. Still a chance. Going to topic number 6, Shefty. Sunday, kind of some breaking news with Romeo Doubs out of nowhere gets suspended for one game. What do you make of that whole entire situation? And is that completely over now, or will this linger on at all, you think?
Well, the Packers have made it very clear that they plan to bring back Romeo Doubs for this week's game, that it was a one-game suspension for conduct detrimental to the team. But we talked about this on the Pat McAfee Show, and I think it's worth pointing out again. In speaking to people over the weekend, they believe there's a trend across the league with some younger players who are very, very conscientious and aware of how many targets they get in a certain game. And they're aware of how many targets they get in a certain game because the number of targets leads to the amount of production they have. And the amount of production they have usually translates into the type of contract that they get. And so you could be a receiver who's not having much production, and maybe you're going to make $2, $3, $4 million a year. But if you're a receiver who's catching 100 passes a year, you might be in a position to ask for 25, 30, $35 million a year. So if you are not getting the football, that might mean an offer of a few $1,000,000. If you are getting the football, it might mean an offer 10 times that. And so I think a lot of people feel like some of the younger players take that personal. It means a lot, as it should, and that it's very important, as important as it's ever been, for these young receivers to be getting the football. And when they don't get it, we get some temper tantrums, we get some flare-ups, we get some issues, we get players not showing up to the team facility on a Thursday and Friday, which is exactly what happened last week with the Packers wide receiver Romeo Doubs. Now, I reached out to his agent to ask for an explanation. I didn't hear anything, so I'm going to assume that it had something to do with how much he was or wasn't getting the football. Now, if somebody wants to correct that, I'm all ears. Let me know. But if he's staying away, which you rarely hear of somebody not showing up, there might have been a personal issue. If there is, then apologies there and love to hear about it. But I think the assumption from people was that it had to do with how much he is or isn't being used, considering that the Packers have so many good, young, talented wide receivers. So he gets suspended. Now we'll see where it goes. But I just think it's important across the league, big picture, to think of everybody being very aware of their numbers, their production, how important they are to a team, because there's millions of dollars on the line with the jobs that these guys do. The difference between a receiver who's not getting the football and the difference with a receiver who is getting the football is huge, and that is something that is worth paying attention to.